Are you looking to get games of Webcam Commander? Well, look no further than the Tolarian Community College Discord server. Our Discord server is 100% moderated and, best of all, 100% free. You can get Webcam Commander day or night, as well as webcam games of any other Magic the Gathering format. Check it out or follow the links in this video's description. It's free! Without a doubt, the Commander Precon decks are one of the best prepackaged Magic the Gathering products out there, but what happens when they don't make a Commander Precon around a character or theme that you were hoping they would make one around? Well, look no further than the Tolarian Community College Build Your Own Precon. Today, Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil is the oldest, wisest, and perhaps most powerful inhabitant of Middle-earth. Not only is he probably immortal, but he's also the only character in Lord of the Rings who cannot be influenced by the One Ring. It's true, read the books. And of course, he loves nothing more than sitting around and singing songs and telling stories, which makes him the perfect creature to helm a Saga's Commander deck. But as a 5-color commander, surely we can't build Tom Bombadil without shelling out a ton of money, right? Wrong. For about the same price you'd spend on an official Commander pre-constructed deck, you can build your own Tom Bombadil Precon, presenting Lore of the Rings, a 5-color saga deck helmed by none other than Tom Bombadil, the chillest man in Middle-earth. Best of all, as of the recording of this video, all 100 cards that make up the Lore of the Rings Precon cost a total of $44.95, including Tom Bombadil himself. So let's jump right in, shall we? Tom Bombadil is a 4/4 God Bard creature that costs 1 of each colored mana. Proof and indestructible as long as there are at least 4 total lore counters among sagas you control. Once per turn, when the final chapter ability of a saga you control resolves, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal another saga. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest of the cards you revealed on the bottom of your library in a random order. So essentially, Tom wants you to have a few sagas in play to keep him from getting targeted or destroyed, and then he will continue telling stories to your opponents forever. All told, there are 25 sagas in the Lore of the Rings Precon with a wide range of useful abilities. In order to make Tom his merriest self, we need to be sure he has a whole pile of good stories to tell. And wow, do we ever! We've got the story about Nicol Bolas's rebirth, the story about Tybalt stealing the Tyrite sword, the story of Elspeth returning from the Theros underworld, the story of the restoration of Eiganjo, and of course the most hated story of every Magic the Gathering player that attends Friday Night Magic, the Bath Song. Why are you booing me? I'm right. All told, there are 25 sagas in our Lore of the Rings Precon with a wide range of useful abilities. You've got sagas that ramp you or fix your mana, sagas that steal creatures or destroy various permanents, sagas that draw you cards, sagas that wrath the board, sagas that make creature tokens, and sagas that pump your creatures. If you noticed some sagas appearing multiple times, that's because most sagas do multiple things. Working in tandem, Tom's array of sagas combine to cover virtually every action you could want to take in a game of Commander. When one dies, another jumps up to take its place. Once you've assembled this engine, it's very hard for your opponent to disrupt, as it will be difficult for them to remove Tom from the battlefield. What's more, this deck is packing several ways to remove lore counters from your sagas, keeping them around to trigger every turn without ever having to sacrifice themselves. Sagas only trigger when lore counters are added to them, not when they're removed, so you won't immediately get the ability that corresponds to the new total of lore counters on the saga. After the draw step of your next turn, a new counter will be added to the saga, and you'll get that corresponding chapter ability. Managing the lore counters on your sagas is a good thing to do in this deck, regardless of which sagas you have in play. But some sagas are even better to do this with than others. Resetting your Binding of the Old Gods back to 0 lore counters every turn means every turn you can destroy the scariest non-land permanent on the battlefield. Do the same with Song of Eärendil, and you'll get to scry 2 and draw 2 every turn. One of the best kinds of sagas to keep around are the sagas that temporarily steal your opponent's creatures or artifacts, like the Horus Heresy, the Scroll of Isildur, and the Akroan War. If you steal kill an opponent's creature with the Akroan War, and then never let your saga sacrifice itself because you keep removing lore counters from it, then you'll never have to give back their creature. If you can get the Akroan War down to 0 lore counters, then on your next turn you'll steal another creature that will remain yours until the Akroan War leaves play, which it won't do unless someone points enchantment removal at it. Another great trick to do with your sagas is to remove a lore counter in response to the final chapter ability. This keeps the saga from sacrificing itself while still granting you the final chapter ability and still triggering Tom Bombadil's second ability to go digging for a new saga to replace it, even though the saga is still in play. You can also manipulate lore counters in the other direction by adding new ones to your sagas either with Satsuki or Goldberry, or with proliferation effects like Unnatural Restoration. Adding a lore counter to your saga does trigger their next ability, and therefore is a great option when you need access to their next ability ASAP. Keep in mind though that you're also accelerating these sagas to their self-sacrifice clause. There are other ways to get additional value out of your sagas too. Weaver of Harmony can double one of your saga's chapter abilities, while Brago, King Eternal, can blink all your sagas every time he deals combat damage to a player, resetting them back to chapter 1. Unlike removing counters from a saga that's still in play, Brago setting your sagas back to 1 does give you each of those sagas' first chapter ability all over again. Despite your best efforts, some of your sagas likely will reach their 3rd chapter without disruption and then send themselves to the graveyard. Fortunately, Lore of the Rings has several ways to bring those sagas back to the battlefield, either in big bursts with powerful sorceries or one at a time with Gen, Arcanum Weaver. Fun fact, sagas are enchantments. I know this is groundbreaking information. In fact, if you were to add up all the enchantments of various kinds in our deck, you would find that Lore of the Rings is 34% enchantments, which means we get to run enchantress effects. Traditional enchantress cards are those that read, whenever you cast an enchantment, draw a card. There are a lot of these types of cards in Magic. If you'd like a refresher on what a typical enchantress commander deck build looks like, you can see our video on the subject here. There are a lot of these types of cards in Magic, but many of them cost too much to include in a $45 Precon. But even with our budget, we still have access to 4 Enchantress cards: Sithis, Mesa Enchantress, Satyr Enchanter, and Enchantress's Presence. Jukai Naturalist makes all of our enchantments cost 1 less generic mana to cast, which is useful given that many of the best sagas come with a hefty mana cost. Meanwhile, Doomwake Giant and Archon of Sun's Grace reward us for all the enchantments entering play. Keep in mind that their Constellation ability triggers whenever an enchantment enters play, regardless of whether that enchantment was cast or not. That means sagas that enter play off of Tom Bombadil's ability trigger your Constellation, as do sagas blinked by Brago, King Eternal. Sanctum Weaver is an all-star in this deck, not just fixing our mana, but providing a 1-Dryad source of massive amounts of mana that continually scales as the game progresses. Less powerful but still useful mana dorks in Lore of the Rings are Paradise Druid and Ornithopter of Paradise, 2 mana creatures that tap for any color of mana. We also have a trio of mana rocks that fix our colors as well. As a base green deck, we also have access to plentiful mana fixing that seeks out lands from our deck, and many of these cards also put those lands directly into play. Therefore, as long as we have consistent access to green mana, it won't be hard to find the rest of our colors too. As far as lands go, we're somewhat limited on what we can run while remaining under our $45 price limit, but that doesn't mean we have to run a pile of basic lands. Each of these slow fetch lands can find us any color of mana we need thanks to the array of typed dual lands we have at our disposal. Unfortunately, very few untapped duals are cheap enough to run in this Precon, but that doesn't mean we can't run any. The Tango lands from Battle for Zendikar. Yes, we are still calling them Tango lands, not Battle lands. They're Tango lands because it takes 2 to tango. We'll often enter the battlefield untapped due to how many ways our deck has of searching up our basic lands. Fortified Village is a part of a dual land cycle that generally isn't very good, but this particular land is serviceable in our deck given we have a total of 13 forests and plains. Additionally, the 4 pain lands in our deck are a reliable source of untapped mana, and we even get to run 1 check land, Sulphur Falls. But what if you want to spend a little bit more than $45 to make the deck a lot more powerful? Well, that is where upgrades come in. If you have the budget and you want to invest a little extra into Lore of the Rings, there are a number of cards in the $2 to $5 range that will improve this deck considerably. These 7 sagas are all powerful options that would make excellent additions to the deck, but they were just a little too expensive to make the cut in the $45 version. To make room for them, I'd recommend you cut some of the lower impact sagas on the list. Osaiju Reaches Skyward, Elspeth's Nightmare, Chico's Reign of Truth, King Nefari's Betrayal, and Phyrexian Scriptures. For the last 2 slots, we'll cut Brilliant Restoration and Archon of Sun's Grace, 2 cards that are totally reasonable inclusions in a budget version of this deck, but aren't crucial to your game plan. Next, we're adding Eidolon of Blossoms and Setessan Champion, Enchantress-style creatures with Constellation. Constellation is a better form of this effect, since it's an enter the battlefield trigger rather than a cast trigger, and therefore triggers off of Tom Bombadil's ability. To make room, cut Mesa Enchantress and Satyr Enchanter. Hex Parasite and Jin-Gitaxias are both excellent cards in this deck, but at about $5 a piece, they took up too much of our $45 budget to include in the base version of the deck. We'll cut Path to the World Tree and Entish Restoration to make room for these. Our last swap will be an upgrade to our mana fixing. World Tree and Chromatic Lantern can turn all your lands into rainbow lands. Important tools for a budget mana base. Farseek is a great mana ramp spell in a 5-color deck, searching up any typed dual land from your deck and putting it directly into play. Lastly, some more untapped lands. Rushland, Carpulsan Forest, Sunpetal Grove, and Hinterland Harbor. To make room for these upgrades, cut Commander Sphere and Coalition Relic, as well as Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wilds, and the 3 Tri-lands, Sandstep Citadel, Seaside Citadel, and Jungle Shrine. It's important to keep the Dominaria United tap lands in your deck until you can afford to replace them with Shocklands or Triomes, as these lands have basic land types and therefore allow your slow fetches to find you any color of mana. And of course, if you have real fetches to replace the slow fetches, go ahead and swap those in, but that's so expensive, it's not technically part of even our upgrade guide. And there you have it, Tom Bombadil's Lore of the Rings Precon for the budget-friendly Magic the Gathering player. Deck lists to both the budget build as well as the upgraded list can be found in this video's description, and if you found this video helpful, you can check out our other build your own precons in this series. An entire playlist is linked in the video description, or you can click on the appropriate thumbnail here. Build your own Commander Precon for just $45 or less. And remember, if you're looking for a great place to play games of Webcam Commander or other Magic the Gathering formats, look no further than the Tolarian Community College Discord server. Our Discord is 100% free and moderated, so there's no better place to check out games of Webcam Commander and Magic the Gathering.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
We're just keeping it casual, aren't we, gang? We're casual commander here.
I'm Spy Satarak, and I'm evading jury duty. My commander is Guillaume, Master Chef.
I'm Krim. I decided to build my Dromar the Banisher deck.
My name's Evan, otherwise better known as Dark Pack Cosplay on the internet. I'll be playing Liliana Heretical Healer.
Old, classic, casual commander deck of mine, Sliver Overlord.
That's not a casual
Urza.
deck.
Definitely
I've
have
been
a
saying
deck for you that is casual, though.
Okay, apparently, are you kidding me? What casual means to Krim is someone holding guns named
Pew Pew! Mind bend. Well, first, I'm gonna make your Urborg make everybody have planes. No.
Oh! So, Rise of the Dark Realm.
Do you want to do that with the Ferocidon on the board?
Well, yeah, that's gonna be a little painful.
Coat of arms.
Oh!
Each creature.
So anyway, I started blasting.